when the best of me is barely breathing, when I'm not somebody I believe in, hold on to me. When I miss the light, the night is stolen, when I'm slamming all the doors you open, hold on to me. Hold on to me. Hold on to me when it's too dark to see you, when I am sure I have reached the end. Hold on to me when I forget I need you, when I let go, hold me again, when I don't feel like I'm worth defending, when I'm tired of all my pretending, hold on to me.
Hello, welcome to Chapel at St. Paul's School of Theology. I'm Reverend Jen Logston Kellogg. I am the chapel coordinator for our Oklahoma City campus. So glad that you were able to join us for chapel today. I hope that you have arrived ready for an encounter with the holy. Our scheduled preacher, Katie Nix, is ill, and so I hope you will keep her in your prayers. And we are delighted that our own Cortney Lemke has been able to step in and will be our preacher for today. I invite you, as we prepare for chapel, to settle your body and your breath and imagine walking through the doorway into a physical sanctuary. That doorway, the entrance, is a liminal space, the transition space. I invite you not to rush through that doorway, but to linger for just a moment at the threshold. In your mind, put away your thoughts of the things that must be done today. Stand on the threshold and wonder, what awaits me in this space that I'm about to enter? I invite you to breathe deeply and be present in that liminal space. Now, open your eyes, your heart, and your mind to receive whatever the Spirit of Truth offers to you today. Hold out your hands, cup them in front of you, and walk into this sacred space, expecting the unexpected.
I
One day, a new ruler came to power over Egypt.
Look, there are more Israelites than ever before, and they are growing more powerful than we are. We need to be careful in our dealings with them. Otherwise, they may grow even greater in number, and in a time of war, join forces with our enemies, fight against us, and then leave the land.
So the Egyptian authorities enslaved the Israelites and appointed cruel slave drivers over them to oppress them with hard, back-breaking labor. They forced them to build storage cities of Pithom and Ramses for Pharaoh. But the harder the slave drivers pushed the Israelites, the more rapidly they had children and spread throughout the land. Because of this, the Egyptians grew to detest the Israelites even more and violently forced them to work until they were sore and tired, far beyond exhaustion. The Egyptians made life bitter for all those Israelites forced to mix mortar, make bricks, and do all the types of grueling work in the fields. They tormented their Israelite slaves until all the work was done. Pharaoh called for some of the Hebrew midwives. Their names were Shiphrah and Puah.
Listen closely. Whenever you are looking after a Hebrew woman who is in labor and ready to deliver, if she gives birth to a son, then kill the baby. If it is a daughter, then allow her to live.
But the midwives respected God more than they feared Pharaoh, so they did not carry out the Egyptian ruler's command. Instead, they let all the boys live. When Egypt's ruler heard this news, they sent for the midwives.
Why have you disobeyed my orders and allowed the boys to live?
Because unlike Egyptian women, Hebrew women are hardy and energetic, and they give birth before the midwife arrives to help.
God was good to the midwives, and under their care the Israelite women had many more children. Despite Pharaoh's orders, the people of Israel became stronger and more powerful. Because the midwives respected God, they were blessed with families of their own. In response to the rapid growth of the Hebrew population, Pharaoh had issued a command to his people.
Every boy who is born to the Hebrews must be thrown into the Nile, and every girl is to be left alive.
One day, a man and a woman, both from the tribe of Levi, married. They became pregnant and gave birth to a son. When she saw that her son was healthy and beautiful, she feared for his safety. So she kept him hidden from view for 3 whole months. When she could no longer keep him hidden away, she took a basket made of reeds, sealed it with tar and pitch, and placed her baby boy in it. Then she wedged the basket among the reeds along the edge of the Nile River. All the while, the child's sister watched from a distance to see what happened to her baby brother. Later on, Pharaoh's daughter came down to bathe in the river, while her young attendants walked along the bank nearby. Pharaoh's daughter noticed the basket wedged among the reeds and wondered what it might contain. So she instructed her maid to bring it to her. When Pharaoh's daughter opened the basket, she found the baby boy. He was crying, and her heart melted with compassion.
This is a Hebrew child. Would you like me to find a Hebrew woman to nurse this child? All right, go find a nurse.
So the baby's sister went and fetched his mother. The boy's mother approached Pharaoh's daughter.
Here, take this child and nurse him for me, and I will pay you for your services.
So the woman took the child, who was secretly her own son, and nursed him just as the Pharaoh's daughter had instructed. The boy grew, and when the time was right, the woman brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and she adopted him as her own. She named him Moses because, as she explained, I took him out of the water.
Hi, everyone. For those of y'all who don't know me, I'm Cortney Lemke. I'm a student assistant at St. Paul, and I'm also director of emerging communities for Woods Chapel Blue Springs Church. In my role at Woods Chapel, I'm tasked with thinking outside the box to offer innovative ministry to folks that aren't returning to church. And you might wonder why this is relevant to the study of Exodus or the theme today of liminal space. The answer is pretty simple. My job requires me to connect with those who are no longer interested for one reason or another with the institution of the church. And so for millions of reasons, this has me constantly engaged in theological reflection, asking myself, as I learned from Pastor Gary Rolshan, where is God in this? And in that spirit, I want to begin by asking you all a question. So I'm going to ask for some audience participation. Show of hands. How many of us have asked ourselves, why do bad things happen to good people? Okay, great. I see that some of us are being honest today and others, I don't know, but that's okay. This is a really sticky subject. Yes, and it's a valid question. In our field, we see pangs of hunger, suffering, addiction, oppression, and isolation all around us. And it's natural to ask, where is our all-loving, all-knowing, gracious, merciful, and powerful God in the midst of pain and suffering and injustice? So let's address the scripture again very briefly. To summarize, a homicidal and power-hungry Pharaoh declares genocide on Hebrew male babies. And Shiphrah and Puah, the midwives, dissent and choose to aid as many babies as possible. As a result, Hebrew families thrive. So Pharaoh doubles down on the genocide by drowning these male children. And Moses' mother, Jochebed, in an ironic twist, does set her baby into the Nile, but sets him adrift in the waters in this basket of pitch and tar and reeds, and charges her daughter with the task of watching the baby from a distance. And this baby floats into the unknown and is intercepted in what I imagine is the nick of time. Now, preaching at a seminary, the nice thing is I don't have to do a ton of exegesis for you. I have faith that you know what comes before and after this story. But for a moment, just for a moment, let's try to really dig deep and experience the reality of the story. Can you imagine the insanity of this decision-making? I mean, really, for a moment, ask yourself, can you imagine the headspace of putting your vulnerable baby in some reeds on a crocodile-infested river? I cannot fathom it. The closest I get in trying to imagine this is my childhood fantasy of being in a river raft with Huck Finn in the Missouri wilderness. And that is a far cry from the reality of letting go of my child in that way. All I know is if I were in her shoes or her sandals, I'd be asking God, where are you? And by now, perhaps more than ever before, most of us here in this space have been in the wilderness and found ourselves asking God, where are you? But what we're experiencing in this perceived absence is no absence at all. It's the pangs of transformation as we move from one state of being or one way of knowing to another. Liminal space. Those spaces between the known and the unknown have a way of testing us. Between knowing and not knowing, we are often called to try things we've never tried before, even if they seem crazy, like having enough faith to set your baby adrift in a river. So how do we respond faithfully when we're living into the minimal or unknown? And how are liminal seasons nurturing transformation in our lives and in the church? We're going to start first with how do we respond faithfully while living into the unknown? There's a lot to learn from the women in this story. And part of my discipline as a preacher and student is not to just talk ad nauseum about how much I love the book of Exodus and how much we can glean from this incredible story. So instead, I just want to focus a little bit on Shiphrah and Puah at the beginning, these incredible midwives. And their calling as midwives is to nurture life. So when Pharaoh commands them to kill male babies, what is their response? I want to remind you, this is an interactive space. So as I ask questions and things occur to you, please feel free to use the chat screen to participate. I would love to go back after this message and see what your unique thoughts are as you tease out your understanding of how God is using you in liminal space. So again, when Pharaoh commands them to kill these male babies, what is their response? My answer is that their response is nonconformity. They simply said no. They acted instead according to their call and convictions. And it's arguable that without this act of nonconformity, we never would have had the chain of events that led to Moses eventually liberating his people from slavery and into the promised land of Israel. Simple acts of nonconformity add up over time. It's the stuff that movements are born of. First, someone has to be brave and maybe stupid enough to stick their neck out, and someone else has to be brave enough to back up the first one. And it's that simple. And God is there all the time, nudging us to speak up, to stand up, to advocate, to sit in, to take a knee, to bear witness, to turn left when everyone else is turning right, to defy lethal orders, to put our faith in grass baskets and earnest prayers for hope and protection. Times of great change call us to take great risks, to move against the grain. So why is a faithful response rooted in nonconformity? Why not have patience in God's timing? Why not mind our own business and tend to our own needs or the needs of our neighbors? Well, specifically, it's because of what is at risk if we live into the status quo. Liminality, you see, is not planned change. Planned change can be reverse engineered for tidy and predictable results. Planned change is transitioning back to school, daylight savings time, scheduling a relocation. Liminality is living into an uncertain medical diagnosis, or having to learn how to homeschool during quarantine, or for us preachers, taking church online for the first time because of quarantine, or maybe as preachers now, maintaining church online because people aren't coming back. These liminal spaces, they test us and our assumptions about what is normal. They call us to problem solve for something new. The old ways simply will not do. It's not a matter of philosophy, it's a matter of practicality. Those who flourish in liminal space have to take risks, and they have to fail. The key is to fail often and to fail forward, to illuminate for others the best path. I'm certain that there were children that Shipra and Pua could not save, and there were times that they probably felt that their actions were in vain, but there are children who only lived because Shipra and Pua tried. We learn from their actions that at the very least, when we are in liminal times, that we are called to try, to respond. And we respond to liminality faithfully when we listen to God's still voice in chaos, when we take action that is aligned with our purpose to participate in an act of co-creation to form something new and better. I'd also like to explore, how do liminal seasons nurture transformation in our lives and in the church? Every good story involves a liminal space. Recall some of your favorite books or movies, and you'll know what I mean. Frodo Baggins' slow journey to Mordor, for example, or Bruce Wayne's transformation from orphaned boy to adult crime-stopping Batman. We aren't so different from these heroes. Writing coach Joe Bunting describes the journey through liminal space beautifully. He says that liminality always requires a violent, inciting incident. Transformation always requires death of the old person so they can become something new. When a person enters liminal space, their old value system is destroyed, causing them to become disoriented. They need a new value system to live by, and the experimentation they undertake to discover that value system is always uncomfortable and full of failure. As the prophet Isaiah says, in liminal space, every valley shall be raised up, every mountain and hill made low. The rough ground shall become level, the rugged places a plain. In other words, the status quo has to come to an end for something new to begin. Jeff Goins says this is what liminality is all about, learning to live with tension and pain and waiting. Can you find your equilibrium in a chaotic world? Life is waiting, not just waiting in line at the grocery store or waiting to renew your driver's license. But life is waiting to renew your driver's license. Life is waiting to love and commit and find the work you were meant to do. Our lives are full of inconvenient setbacks, not due to some great cosmic mistake, but because of some divine purpose we don't comprehend. In the waiting, we become. Without being unceremoniously acquainted with the unknown, Jochebed would never have had the audacity to let her son go. And he never would have been discovered by Pharaoh's daughter. He would never grow up to be a prince of Egypt. He would never leave the Hebrews out of bondage through plague and the Red Sea, through 40 years of wandering and complaining followers in the desert. That's something we like to overlook sometimes, is that in that 40 years, people were not always grateful for that leadership. But finally, he led them to Israel. And without that liminal space, he never would have had time to observe his people through 40 years of confusion and wandering, and codified the commandments that would guide our moral lives for thousands of years to come. This story, the story of the transformation of Moses and his people, is the foundation for the very roots of our faith, of the practice of law, and of God making the first holy covenant with humanity. So I'd like to ask for another quick show of hands. How many of us feel here and now like we're wandering in a desert on an individual or institutional level? Don't be shy. I am definitely feeling the pinch. Church involvement is declining. Post-COVID, many of our congregations are feeling a serious strain. And many of us in this field are asking, what is the future of church in this country and beyond? So I ask you now, how will you respond faithfully to the unknown? In my role, I spend a lot of time examining where people are doing life and trying to think of new ways to meet them where they're at. It comes as no surprise to most of us that people are hurting. It sometimes surprises us a little more that they've been hurt by church. They've been hurt by Christians. They also been hurt by the world at large. And these people who are a little gun shy to return back to our pews, they need a safe space to do community, to ask tough questions, to find themselves in service to others, and to discern how they're being called to respond to uncertainty in their own lives. In other words, they also need formation. So with the support of Woods Chapel Blue Springs, I launched Equitable Supper Club, a dinner church-based community outreach as a response to this problem. So far, we've only met as a group twice. However, we are growing, and the response I get when I talk to others about our mission is overwhelming. People can sense the value in what we're doing by offering to do the work of the gospel with people instead of simply telling them about it. This model of microchurch embraces people in the physical and spiritual geographies that they're actually at and connects them to neighbors around a simple supper table. Instead of sermons, we offer table topics, discussion points over which we can think deeply and critically, explore our own ideas, engage in unlearning and relearning, and transform communities one relationship at a time. And whether or not these folks who come to Supper Club return to a brick and mortar church is of little concern, so long as the fruits of the Spirit are flourishing and communities are being transformed. And I wonder sometimes if this response is the equivalent of putting Sunday morning in a grass basket and faithfully letting go with the hope and expectation that God will deliver us to. These are painful and uncertain times that we find ourselves leading through. Some of us feel crazy for doing this work, for responding to God's call in the midst of chaos. And maybe we are a little crazy. It's like that song that Seal sang, and we're never going to survive unless we go a little crazy. And we have to be in order to keep trying, to fail forward, to listen and respond when others won't, and to allow this to change us for the better. After all, we are called to the work of transformation. Amen.
Oh, how high would I climb mountains if the mountains were where you hide? Oh, how far I'd scale the valleys if you graced the other side. And oh, how long have I chased rivers from lonely seas to where they rise, against the rush of grace descending from the source of its supply. 'Cause in the highlands and the heartache, you're neither more or less inclined. I will search and stop at nothing. You're just not that hard to find. In my way, you're the summit where my feet are. So I will praise you in the valleys all the same. No less God within the shadows, and no less faithful when the night leads me astray. valleyed hill called Calvary. But for the one I call Good Shepherd, who like a lamb was slain for me. Oh, come the pastures we call grace, a mighty river flowing upward from a deep but empty grave. So I will praise you on the mountain. Yes, you are. I will praise you in the valley, so sing. No less God within the shadows. No less faithful when the night leads me astray. You're the heaven where my heart is. In the highlands and the heartache, all the same.
In mountains and valleys, in seasons of unknowing. May God work through our discomfort and unknowing with creativity. May we respond ever faithfully with good trouble. Go in peace.
When the best of me is barely breathing, when I'm not somebody